as we transition over to Jacob, I just wanted to call out their amazing partnership with us, with Cisco and with Meraki over the last few years. They've been Partner of the Month a couple of times. They've been really upping their participation with events like these. So we're super thankful for them. And I'm just really excited for everyone to see the technology in the demo here from Jacob. So, Jacob, thank you again for participating and for being here today. And I'll pass it over to you.
All right, awesome. Well, I appreciate it. So yeah, hopefully everybody can see my my slides here. So I think the first thing I need to do is kind of introduce Ybot as a company and kind of explain what we're about, right? So we've been around since about 2016, right? So we're I guess fairly young as far as companies go, but it feels like it's been a while. But our focus is really about digital experience, getting visibility and monitoring and things like that. So we have a couple different methods of gathering that data, but the whole point is we combine passive kind of AI-driven analysis of the environment as well as client testing, where we can actually act. We have sensors that would act as end users and run tests on your network to really validate that your fancy new Wi-Fi 7 environment is really meeting the expectations that you set forth, right? So we have a number of great partners. Cisco is certainly foremost amongst that. So we've done a lot of work with Cisco traditional, you'll say, especially around that 1800S sensor that Cisco has, which I believe is end of life. And then we also have done some partnership with Meraki, and that includes API integration with our platform. So just to kind of explain what our platform is, so we refer to it as the wireless intelligence platform. And the whole point is, if this diagram makes this clear, right? We look at both the Wi-Fi side of things, right? So your Wi-Fi network, how it's configured, what channels it's using, as well as neighbors, right? And that's the biggest problem with Wi-Fi is it's a unlicensed spectrum. So you have other, tenants and neighboring businesses and things like that that can interfere. So that visibility, as well as visibility into the, say, Wi-Fi disruptors you might have, right? So, RF interference, unauthorized APs, IoT devices, things of that nature. And all of this data is collected with our, we have our sensors. We call them DEX sensors. We also have DEX agents. So you have, our sensors are purpose-built tri-radio, heavy-duty devices, really meant to give you lots of extremely rich visibility. Excellent complement for your the infrastructure you manage with your Cisco networks, right? And then we also have agent software, so you can have visibility of the end users as well, which is great for your hybrid, workforce, right? When people are in networks that you don't manage, you don't have any visibility at all. So we have great, tools to give you that. And what's the objective with Ybot? Well, simply it's about reducing the amount of time you're spending on troubleshooting, right? We want to get you to your root cause as quickly as we possibly can with the data that we have. Also, reducing on-site visits. Many environments are such that you don't have, technicians or wireless professionals on site. So having the tools there already deployed obviously makes things a lot easier. Being proactive, giving you alerting, things like that. And at the end of the day, it's all about visibility, right? We want to give you the visibility into all sides of the network, right? Cisco gives you extremely rich visibility of the infrastructure and how it's operating, and we give you very rich client visibility to complete that picture. And of course, that's great. So I'll jump into a live demo. I saw we just had a question popped up around our agent, which OS it supports. Currently, it's Windows. It's currently a Windows agent. The roadmap is going to be including Mac OS and other OSs in the future, but at the present moment, it's Windows. All right, so let me flip over tabs here. There we go. And we'll jump into kind of a live demo. So what we're looking at here, this is the wireless intelligence platform as it's deployed in our corporate office, which is out in Boston, actually. So these are our sensors we're going to look at today. So we can see here we have 3 of our sensors that are active in our office, and these 3 sensors are picking up over the air, it's doing all this analysis, right? Just over the air, right? So these sensors are deployed kind of as sort of end users are. You plug them into the switch, or just like your APs as well. And what we're picking up here, you can see 52 wireless access points, 29 clients in the office right now. We break down the bands, that we're seeing used, 2.45 gig. You can see in this case we have a lot of 2.4 clients, which isn't great. Hopefully everybody's getting away from that, as time goes on. And then you can see the network testing performance. So in addition to the passive analysis, right, we're actually acting as a client running synthetic tests, which we'll get into some details on this, but you can see a high-level report, pass fail rates. We also look at DHCP performance, DNS performance, and radius, right? So you can see if those underlying systems are potentially, the root cause of some of the issues that you're, experiencing in that environment, right? Before I jump into some details, I also just want to mention our sensors are designed to work across large organizations where you'll group them, depending on the site you want to monitor, meaning, you can keep things organized. So you might have, say, a site where you have totally different SSIDs and things like that, and you want to have a separate configuration for that. So familiar concept, right? Especially if you work with Meraki and things like that, right? So you can have different sort of, we call these locations. And also a top level view called organization status to see the health of each site on one page. So at your network operations center, you can just have one screen you keep up to see which one is the problems, click into that site, and then dive in from there if you wanted to go that route. But let's click on this site again. So what I'll do now, I'm going to click into one of our sensors, maybe this one that's in our cafeteria, just to see what it's picking up. Now we can see at this level, it's seeing 14 issues. So currently there's probably quite a lot going on. So if we click into the sensor, as we can see now, the screen loads where there's a lot of tiles and charts and graphs and things like that. But really, once you start looking at it, it's quite logical, right? And one thing that I'm very happy with our product is this list of issues. And this is where our AI engine comes into play, because it's taking lots of very rich data. And what it's doing is it's breaking it down into human readable output, right? So for example, if you look at a packet capture, you'll see all sorts of frames that come through and beacons. We actually read that data. And, for example, if we see some, Josh had that great slide about the history of Wi-Fi, right? And even these brand new Wi-Fi 7 APs you look at, I mean, they can still support Wi-Fi 1. But, we would argue that Wi-Fi 1 is probably not something you want to have enabled. So if we see things like that, we recommend, as a best practice to say disable the legacy data rates. And that's kind of what our solution is here for, to give you an actionable item to go through and address that, right? So we call these events of interest. So within a packet capture, you'll see lots of things that are, noise. So we try to bubble up the important things. And this also goes down to clients. So when we look at individual users, we can see if there's a deauthentication, say, where a client fails to get connected. And here we see it's a four-way handshake timeout. So that's a problem, with the security handshake that happens. And again, we're just bubbling this up automatically for you. And this does, and just like everything else on our platform, does include historical data. So you can go back in time and see those events as they had happened in the past, which is extremely useful when you think about doing some post hoc analysis of say, like an outage or a performance degradation. Okay. And then if I scroll down here, we'll see some of these tests. And this is really where, your sensor is an end user, right? And you can define all sorts of custom tests. Now, one, very common use case we encounter when we are working with healthcare is monitoring EHR software, right? So your Epic system, Cerner, what have you. Obviously, that's about as mission critical as it gets in terms of application performance. So what you can do is you can define tests. Let's click on this example here for Office 365, right? So you can define a test by inputting, say, the URLs of those services, and then the sensor will, on a schedule, make a connection to the network. So we're not just only monitoring the URLs from the wire perspective. We can do that, but in this example, what we're doing is connecting to our Meraki Enterprise Wi-Fi. We're authenticating as an end user, measuring radius performance. So you can see if that maybe takes too long. Very common issue when you deal with roaming problems, things like that. We get DHCP, right? And again, response time is measured, so you're able to see if there's any problem there. that might contribute to your issue. And then, of course, we, in this case, are doing some web requests. So we're looking at the response time, the DNS performance there, plotting this out on a graph. But this also has the ability to be a notification that you receive. So if you have an outage or a test starts failing too many times over a time period, you have options to really define what triggers an alert. But the point is, this is a proactive methodology, so you don't have to go back and have a user test certain things or open command line and things of that nature. And what you can also see here is this BSSID dropdown. So one really cool feature of our testing, let's go to the edit test page. And this becomes very useful when you think about very dense deployments where you have, these days, right? You're designing for capacity, coverage, right? I mean, that's been said for a while, and it continues to be true. So the point is, you might put one sensor in, and you'll have a bunch of APs nearby. So you can either have a sensor automatically connect to an AP, just like a client will, and that usually results in the closest AP. But you can also specify multi-AP testing, where you could have, we let you go up to 10 with this, and you can set an RSSI cutoff. And then in a round robin fashion, what's going to happen is the sensor is actually going to touch all of the radios that are available in that environment. And that works across, the 3 bands of Wi-Fi now, right? It's a 2.4, 5 gig, 6 gigahertz. And what that's going to tell you is if you have an AP that, very commonly, we'll see cases where APs are maybe beaconing, right? And you connect to them, but then the traffic isn't forwarded, right? And that could be a VLAN problem. It could be, some sort of crash with the AP software, something like that. We get that report, and then you're able to see that all of your radios are up and running, which is super cool. And it's great to validate that. So, and I did see some stuff in the Q&A that I did want to answer. Let me see. I'm not a WebEx expert. I
You want
guess,
me to read them off to
Matthew,
you, Jacob?
yeah, if you could, that would be great.
Yeah, so the first question was from Wasim. He said, what OS are supported for agent? And then what agent does differently than the sensor versus, what agent works differently on the sensor and vice versa, I think. Maybe that's...
Yeah, no, I think, yep, that makes sense. So, and I answered the OS one earlier, right? So currently the agent software is Windows for the OS. And then the difference really between the two, right, is the sensor is a kind of purpose-built, ready-to-go product. You plug it in, it gets online, it starts doing its thing. And the sensor is, I would say, more robust in terms of the hardware, right? So some of the things the sensor does, which is really cool. I didn't get into every feature yet, but we have, airtime use measurement on multiple channels simultaneously. We have spectrum data. And if you look at this, I can see that there's a case where we picked up a microwave oven causing interference, right? And that's with spectrum data on the sensor. Now the agent, what that will do is it'll look at the client. And then, if your clients are roaming or something like that, we actually have a partnership with Intel where the Intel driver will tell us, say, we roam because we found a better AP, or the RSSI degraded or something like that. So the agent's, running on the actual end user, and it's sort of showing the end user session, whereas the sensor is sort of sitting in between your end users and your infrastructure, and it's giving you that visibility that you really need to see what's going on. And I saw another question just pop up as I was talking, so.
Yeah, that was a follow-up around, does the agent isolate client device related issues versus actual like Wi-Fi issues? So can you see things from the client side versus the wireless side?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the agent's very good at that, right? So it will isolate, say, a wireless issue versus a client performance issue because we record the wireless metrics, right? The RSSI, the data rates, the QBSS channel utilization, so we can see if the APs nearby are busy. And then we also have testing that runs on the agent, meaning you can do things like load websites from the agent and get similar reports here to the sensor. And of course, that'll tell you if the Wi-Fi connection is good and the client's not bouncing around roaming a bunch, but we're still having performance issues. We'll definitely see some performance or some root cause going on there. Go ahead.
I was going to say there was also a call out from Rob around DEX agents having its own dashboard. If you were planning on showing that.
Yeah, I could jump into that for sure. Yeah. So let me stop sharing my screen for 1 second just to pull that up. Take me. There you go. All right. Cool. All right, so this is our Dex agent dashboard, where you can see this is kind of our lab environment, right? So the handful of devices running the software. I'll click on one of these devices and sort of show you the type of data that we're able to get. So here's just a laptop I have, right? And you can see a similar interface to the sensor where we have some tests like Microsoft Teams simulation, web testing. We also do report issues that the client can see. Say there's channel width problems, or here's some oddball channels like channel 10 and channel 3, which isn't great, but we see these things passively. And then the event logging, reports, anytime you see these clients sort of bouncing around and roaming or missing beacons, things like that. And these are, by the way, this would be a wireless issue, right? And if you look at this log, you can see my client actually had to move. There's a channel switch announcement from the AP. And then I missed beacons because that AP shut off its radio to switch channels. And then I actually had to move to a different AP because it didn't happen smoothly. So that was a poor experience for an end user. And that's a Wi-Fi issue, right? Versus say, what's an example of a performance issue? Well, maybe, a client is actually failing to connect properly to your VPN or something, and it's unable to reach, internally resolvable host names. You could set up a test, say, to put in some host names that would only be reachable if VPN was active, and then you could see if those are down, but the Wi-Fi connection's up, right? The clues are really coming together, and you're able to see what's going on from those end users. So yeah, that's kind of the high level of the agent, right? There's always more to these things, but I don't want to overload everybody with all the features. One thing I did want to touch on, because I think it's interesting for everybody here when you deal with more advanced troubleshooting. So a common thing we run into, right, is people with say a attack case open, and you're really trying to get to the root cause of a client failing to connect or having some sort of compatibility issue with the network, and the client vendor is maybe blaming the Cisco APs or something, right? And we all know Cisco APs are usually more stable than every random client vendor out there. So what's kind of cool is you can actually get wireless packet captures from YBot. Now that's not unique on its face, right? Because you can get Wi-Fi PCAPs and other methods. But what's nice about YBot's approach is we have a historical packet capture buffer, and this is for the sensors, to be clear, right? So the sensors have tri-radio captures. In this example, we have one radio on 2.4 on a particular channel, one on 5 gigahertz. Here we see channel 165. And then we have a scanning radio, which does time slicing. But you'll see the available start date of these captures is March 13th, right? So we have a very long historical buffer on this sensor, which really lets us solve one of the biggest problems with packet captures, which is you need to be at the right place, right channel, right time to have the data you need to say, get to the root cause. And having a sensor already in that room, pulling that data on the appropriate channel means it's a matter of just picking your time window, click and retrieve, and then it's a .pcap file, which you can then open in Wireshark or your protocol analyzer of choice, or of course just maybe attached to the TAC case, right? And that can save everybody a lot of time and really prove out what the root cause is, right? Because we do certainly try to automate that with this list of issues as much as we can. But when you're dealing with very in-depth stuff and you have vendors, you need to prove that an issue's happening, you really can't beat having that wireless 802.11 capture.
Yeah,
So,
no more needing to set 10 different MacBooks up, each sniffing a different channel, right, for that use case. So
oh man.
there was another question around the use case of a high capacity, I'm paraphrasing this, high capacity classroom, and someone wanting to see if one of the APs goes into high radio use, like if YBot's in the middle, and what's the best way they could look for that type of info.
Absolutely, yeah. So we have measurements for channel utilization, for example. So we could see how busy a channel is at a given point in time. If I look at this historically, we can actually see a graph of this. So when you deal with a high density, say a classroom, right? Here's actually kind of a good little display here. we'll see that we have a breakdown of overhead, actual data utilization, and then interference. So we can tell, because we get channel use from our radio, we can tell what's a Wi-Fi packet that's decodable and what's not, right? And that, of course, does break down if you have a utilization problem with the channel. Now that goes even further because we have some reports like if the management overhead is too high, we actually break down the different type of traffic it could be. So it could be a lot of, say, beacon frames because you have legacy data rates configured, right? And every beacon takes just 1 meg, so it's using much more airtime than you might want. Probe responses, probe requests, all sorts of things. We actually break things down per client also, which is kind of neat. So if I look at a individual user, sometimes these individual clients use a lot of the airtime. So that's another example of a root cause you can dive into with this passive analysis, right?
So the follow-up is there a way to get an alert for that? Like, can you do alerting with this platform where it's like,
yes,
high radio usage on this channel from this specific location or IP?
Yep, absolutely. So we have alert rules you can create. And I believe one of those alert rules is, related to channel utilization. So yes, absolutely, you can trigger alerts with this. And we have another number of other options. So we have alerts around sort of the wireless conditions, and we also have alerts with any of those tests that I talked about earlier. So those can also trigger notifications. And also just throw it out there, we have a fully featured REST API. So if you are wanting to build something more custom, say use Prometheus and Grafana, and then maybe use that in conjunction with Cisco's great APIs and build a dashboard where all this data is on one page. Absolutely, that is doable, and we have a lot of customers that actually do that.
Yeah, love it. And the last question was around scale. Like, how many APs in your environment supported by like a single sensor? Maybe just talk about scale and like how many sensors you'd recommend, things like that. Like, is there a maximum like size to a wireless environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you do a scale, a lot of it comes down to, first of all, we do want to be consultative, right? So if you are, looking into YBot and you want to know more, we're more than happy to kind of review your network with you, look at your floor plans, look at how many APs you have and things like that, and help you determine the right number for you. In fact, we actually have, if you make use of Ekahau, one of the simulated APs in there is a YBot sensor. So you can get a good idea of coverage with that. It's probably the best way to do it if you have all your floor plans properly set up and walls drawn, things like that. But just a ballpark rule of thumb stuff, one sensor is picking up usually somewhere between 4 to 8 access points is what we're generally seeing. And again, that's very dependent on density of the deployment and the construction of the building.
Gotcha. Yeah, there was a follow-up to that around, can the sensors like detect and recommend coverage, like in case the APs might not be optimally placed and things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do report from the sensor point of view the signal strength of all of the detected APs. Of course, you can filter to make sure you're only looking at your APs in a really dense environment like Manhattan or something. You'll see a lot of neighbors. So you can use this to determine based on your design if you're meeting your primary, your secondary, your tertiary coverage based on the signal strength here. You just sort by that and we'll tell you. And we also call out, let's see if I have an example of it. Not in front of me, but we have an alert, say your 2.4 channel power level is much higher than say the 5 or the 6 gig, right? We point that out and you'll be able to see that as an example. So yeah, I think we make some recommendations that can help with that design.
Cool. And then other questions came in. So regarding like the alerting, is it possible to set up where you can get general reports, like maybe monthly or weekly, not just for specific alerts, but pretty much how your entire wireless environment is doing?
Yeah, that's a good question. We do have some things like that, right? So our notification profiles, you do have like summary options where you can say notify if there's too many triggering events over a time range, which you can define. We don't have fully bespoke automated reports at this point. It's definitely on our roadmap, but using our API, it's certainly possible to build something like that. Again, like not to keep talking about Grafana, but I think Grafana has some great reporting options you can maybe make use of there.
Cool. I think that's all the questions. I guess last one before we kick it over to Matt to wrap up is Catalyst Center integration on the roadmap for you guys.
Yeah, actually, yeah. So we do have API integration with both Catalyst Center and Meraki, which is awesome, and we're also talking, Cisco Spaces as well to that end. But the point is, yeah, you could punch in the, say your Catalyst Center user or your Meraki API key, and we will take that data and then use that to enrich YBot's data, right? So it'll help improve, say, like client host names, where we just see a MAC address, we can find out the host name from, um, from Catalyst Center or Meraki. So a lot of questions coming in. This is great.
Yeah, I was going to say we have a very active chat. So Jacob, if there was anything you wanted to finish out presenting prior to running over to Q&A, I know. I mean, I'm loving all the
No,
questions that are being asked. So whatever works best for your time.
Yeah, I've touched on what I like to cover when we deal with high level demos. So I can stop screen sharing, and then if there's any remaining questions for YBot, we can answer those.
Yeah, there's just a couple more coming in, and then Matt will save you like 5 minutes to kind of close out. Another question that came in is there options to suppress some alerts, like if there's too many SSIDs on a 2.4 gigahertz, or like things that are network specific? So
Yep.
I guess the ability
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
like what alerts you get.
Yep, all the alerts that we point out, you have options to suppress, right? So if you find, say, there's cases where you need to run 6 SSIDs, and we might complain about that and say you should decrease that, but you can't. So you can hide alerts like that come up to help improve the visibility.
Gotcha. And then a question around like mixed environments. Although we like everybody to be running Cisco APs, right? Like if there's transition or if there's a multi-vendor environment, is that something you support today?
Yeah, absolutely. So our technology was started and continues to be vendor agnostic, which is great. I mean, yeah, if you're a Cisco shop, awesome, because Cisco makes excellent APs. But you can also have tenants, right, that are running, I don't know, Extreme, Ubiquity, whatever, right? And if those APs are misconfigured and causing issues, we point that out. And of course, if you are an Extreme shop or whatever, it doesn't matter, right? We can help you get visibility. Again, it's kind of better together with Cisco because we have things like that API integration, but we will work in multi-vendor environments.
Cool. And other than that, just looks like some positive feedback, and someone asked for a follow-up around how to get started with Grafana and YBot, since you're recommending it so much.
Yeah, we have a webinar coming up about that, so it's kind of top of mind. But yeah.
Cool. Nice. Yeah, then feel free to, if there's anything you want to say before we close out, then hand it over to Matt and take next steps.
No, just thanks so much for the time, and I appreciate everybody attending.